I've been asked to speak to you today on why we celebrate and should celebrate Veterans Day. First, I want to start by telling you how truly honored and grateful I am to today have this opportunity to meet many of you and also meet several of my fellow veterans. You simply don't know how this makes me feel and how lucky I am to actually do this today, so thank you for that. I'd like to tell you a little about myself and who I am. My name is Captain Matt Beal. Yes, I know it says James D. Beal, but I have two middle names, and in the Army, you're only allowed one. I am currently the commander of Rear Detachment 1st Squadron 14th Cavalry Regiment on Joint Base Lewis McChord. I've been a platoon leader in Iraq and a company commander twice after that, once in Iraq and once again in Afghanistan. But before all of that, I was just Matt Beal, the son of a Southern Baptist preacher who grew up all over the South and the Midwest. Throughout my life, I've been asked why I decided to join and serve in the Army. And I can always say it feels like something I always should do and wanted to do. As a child, I was enthralled by movies and stories of veterans and past wars. Given the choice between playing football and playing Army, I would inevitably choose Army. I would grab my toy guns and be neck deep in the woods, ready to face any foe who dared threaten me, my country, or my friends. I still remember the first toy gun that I ever had, as does my little brother who told the story when I was married. It was a yellow plastic wiffle ball bat that served as my rifle, and I was caught in my neighbor's flower garden with it as I battled my imagined foes. Needless to say, Mrs. Fogg was not thrilled. You see, I had been captivated by what I saw as the most incredible men and women imaginable. They weren't superstars, sports stars, actors, or even famous. They were normal people who answered a call and bravely faced everything that was thrown at them. How could I not be enthralled by that? As I grew older, I grew bolder. And one day while visiting my grandfather, who served on an LCI ship in the South Pacific, I asked him about his experiences. My entire life, I had been told to not talk to Papa about the war, make loud noises, or talk about anything that had to do with death or dying in his presence. And I never fully understood why. However, on that fateful day, I asked him to tell me about his time in the Navy. And he did. Now, mind you, he didn't tell me about his ship being hit, or receiving a Purple Heart, or why he still jumped at any unexpected noise, and still won't to this day. What he did tell me normally began with, "I knew this fella." The fella obviously being himself. And the stories he began to tell me were the good times he had had. The time where they pulled pranks on their senior officers, or ran around on islands in the South Pacific in a Model T Ford that they had stolen. That they ended up crashing up a palm tree. And as he told these stories, I began to notice that everyone in my family had begun to gather around. His own wife, my grandmother, my mom, my aunts, and my uncles. Everyone had gathered around to listen, because not only was this the first time that I was hearing these stories, but it was the first time that they had heard any of these stories. So why do we celebrate veterans and Veterans Day? What is it that makes this one day so special that we ask a nation to stop and pay homage and respect to these simple soldiers? I can tell you that after hearing these stories, I began to understand. I had seen the old movies and TV shows, but when you begin to add a human aspect, and I began to associate the things I was seeing with people I knew and loved, I began to see that there was something deeper, more profound, and interesting than anything the movies could truly ever show or describe. As I began to be more and more interested in the military, I began to learn that I was literally surrounded by veterans. I learned that my barber had served in Korea. I learned that men and women in our church had fought in Vietnam. I learned that one of my father's best friends had not only served in Vietnam, but had been awarded the Silver Star. How was this possible? I had grown up around these men and women. I never knew they were soldiers or sailors, airmen, or Marines. They were deacons, store owners, lawyers, doctors, barbers, and farmers. They didn't strut around telling everyone that they had served or brag about what they had done, and many still won't to this day. They were just men and women doing everything they could to live their life and live it to the fullest, each and every day that they had. There's power in that. There's respect in that. There's courage in that. And I had been struck by it. Now, I believe that God has a plan for all of us, and that He works in our everyday lives. With that being said, it is no small wonder to me that my dad ended up being a pastor at Leavenworth Baptist Church next to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. This was where I met Lieutenant Colonel Vic Robertson, who learned that I was interested in the military, but still woefully uninformed about it. This man took me to lunch and spoke with me about what I wanted and what it was like to serve, and following our conversation, he agreed to help me along that path. With his help, I received an ROTC scholarship to Mississippi State University, where I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the branch of armor in May of 2004, and I've been serving ever since. To many folks, I am a veteran. I have deployed to war and come home. I have done many things that my family, friends, and neighbors all think that a veteran should do, but I must be honest, I still do not feel like a veteran, that I in any way compare to those men and women who I knew or grew up around. Nor do I feel like more of a veteran than my own soldiers who deployed with me. I view them as veterans, as simple men and women who answered a call, picked up arms, and took on a burden so few have ever taken up. I can tell you so many stories of what I would call our modern-day veterans, of how I've kept in contact with my soldiers, as many have gotten out of the military, pursued degrees, jobs, families, and so many other endeavors. I can regale you with stories of their sheer bravery in combat, and of how their quick thinking and leadership ensured our safety or the safety of others. I can also share with you stories of loss and mourning, as some of my former soldiers made that final sacrifice and paid a debt that the nation will forever owe them. You see, I've been a witness to veterans all of my life. Before me sit veterans of conflicts that include World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Panama, the Gulf War, Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan. You are the veterans I witness and see, and to this day I still aspire to live up to. My fellow soldiers, they're the veterans to me. The normal, everyday people who made an unimaginable decision to serve in something that stands for so much, and once their duty is done, to continue in their lives with a sense of duty and pride that so many Americans will never know. So again, why? Why do we celebrate our veterans and Veterans Day? And my answer is simply one of mine own. I celebrate Veterans Day because I see veterans all around. I am surrounded by them. Men and women who are farmers, store owners, barbers, lawyers, doctors, shopping in the grocery store, or walking in a park. Even those who are still serving. And I can't help but admire them. They are ordinary. They are everyday life. They are exactly what makes up this great nation. And I can't help but to hope to one day to sit amongst these everyday citizens and count myself as part of their extraordinary ranks. Thank you.